Welcome to the very first episode of Digital Doc Interviews. This is a super exciting episode because not only is it the first episode, but we also get to interview Dr. Eric Gantwerker. Dr. Gantwerker is the perfect person to kick off our Digital Doc Games interview series because not only is he someone that I'm honored to call a mentor and a friend, he is the vice president and medical director of Level X. What is Level X? We'll find out shortly. But to sum up, Level X makes video games for doctors. They are a true game dev company with seasoned talent in the video game industry that understands the value of video games as a medium for education. In this interview, we'll talk about how Eric navigates as a practicing physician, but also someone who is deeply rooted in the startup industry and the video game industry. We'll talk about the challenge of innovating in the healthcare space that is typically traditional and sometimes resistant to new technologies, certainly video games. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll stop talking. We'll get to the interview. Let's go back a little bit in time, about a week ago, to when I did this interview. My hair was a little longer, my camera was a little blurrier, but I think you'll still enjoy it. Have fun, and thanks for coming along.
Hi, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming along and with your fancy Microsoft Teams setup here and talking with us.
For sure. This is great.
We were saying before we figured out the recording and went live that I'm going to need to come to you for some advice on camera setups, and the issue is finding any that aren't sold out during pandemic.
Correct. Just as an example, I got a red microphone. I wanted the blue or black, but I had to wait 3 weeks to get that. So
right. That, you know what? I like the red. You got the blue shirt, the red microphone. You're covered.
There you go.
You're covered.
There you go.
So Eric, obviously we know each other, and I've had the pleasure of having many conversations with you. But for anyone that's watching, could you give us who is Eric?
That's a convoluted question. So, I think my identity, I see myself as both professionally spanning both healthcare and games between my two different lives. So I split my time 50-50 between a practicing pediatric otolaryngologist in academic practice and spending my time as the vice president medical director of a video game startup called Level X that specifically makes healthcare games for doctors. And so I sort of see myself from an identity of what my profession is. I see my identity by what I'm trying to do, what I want my legacy to be and my impact. I think for me, my impact, I want to do faculty development to move forward learning and teaching in medical education and health professions education, as well as move forward and upskill all of the medical students, residents, trainees that come through on how to learn. On how to present, how to public speak, upskill things that are specific to otolaryngology as well as just life skills. And so that's sort of what my identity is in a nutshell.
Yeah, and you hit on such important things that really makes you the perfect person for, my first interview, my first experience kind of dipping my toes into this.
So honored.
Yeah. Well, really, and we've had conversations in the past. Eric, you've been a great mentor for me in sort of guiding me through this non-clinical landscape and what it can mean for a doctor to do something out of the hospital. So you've been a great role model for me in that way. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things that we can talk about. Some of my interests, certainly the non-clinical landscape, digital health, or maybe more specifically to you, digital med ed, and of course video games, because that's always a fun thing to talk about.
Sure.
So if it's okay, I'd like to start with the non-clinical part. And
Sure.
For me, just coming out of medical school and graduating, it was definitely a isolating experience at times, at least it could be, and feeling like, we have all the support in medical school to help you towards residency, but if that's not what you want to do, where do you go? And I guess my first question for you, as someone who's doing both, is how do you see in 2020 the non-clinical landscape?
Yeah, so you and I have talked about this in the past. There's a double-edged sword to being a unicorn. There's you're unique in the fact that your path forward is open and the world is open to you. But the other side of it is that there's not many people to show you the way, and so you sort of have to blaze your path on your own and seek out like-minded people. One of the stories that I tell everybody, and you and I have had this conversation in the past, but I went to a dinner, after I started working for the company and I was splitting my time 50-50, I went to a pediatric ENT meeting, or it was an ENT meeting here in Chicago. And one of the fathers of our specialties was at the dinner. I was very excited. I got to talk to him for the first time, and he's retired now, but I said, I introduced myself. My name's Eric Gantwerker. I'm a pediatric otolaryngologist. I work for a tech startup. He took one look at me and said, "What a waste of an education," and turned around.
Wow.
And part of me was taken aback, but part of me was motivated to say, they just don't know what it is to be in 2020 and be a clinician, and to realize the ability to do things that interest you outside of clinical medicine. That just wasn't a thing 20 years ago. People didn't do entrepreneurial things. We didn't live in a can-do economy where you could start your own company in a .com or something like that. But the tools that are available to us as human beings in 2020 in the tech world allow us to foray into all these other worlds that we normally wouldn't have, right? We can skill ourselves on business. We can skill ourselves on technology. We can skill ourselves on any number of things because information is free and open and accessible like it wasn't 20 years ago. If you wanted to find out how to invest, you had to talk to somebody who was an investor. You couldn't do that research yourself as much. You could read about it, but it just wasn't as available as it is now. And so I think one of the things that you have to realize when you're going into this is don't listen to others who are naysayers. Use that as motivation. This is a new field of trying to do physician entrepreneurship. And I think it could take forms in many, many different things. Physicians are looking at revenue streams through real estate, through investing, through venture capital, all these different things. But we all have this group that are wanting to create something, that want to create a new device or, do something completely new and different in digital health and digital technology. And the cool thing is you can do all of it. I was on a panel with a bunch of pediatric otolaryngologists specifically talking about entrepreneurship, and the majority of the people on the panel were doing device development within otolaryngology. Some of them were doing consumer level development, which was really cool and interesting to hear that side. And then there's people who are innovating in digital health. And then there was sort of me, who is using games to advance, clinical practice and games as a proxy for how education should be taught in the digital world. So I think the beautiful thing about you and I, these conversations we've had in the past, is you can do anything you want. Mm-hmm. The world is open to you. And I'll tell you that one of the biggest restrictions that I've had is the established traditionalists in medicine are in leadership positions. And so you have to have somebody who is a forward-thinking leader to allow you, both physically and not just physically, but what's the word I'm looking for? Enable you to enable you to do these things and encourage you. That's what I want. So right. Not just physically allow you to, but also enable and encourage you to do it. And fortunately, I found mentors that were willing to do that, to say, you know what, this is something interesting. This is something cool. We'll, hire you in part-time while you do these other things part-time. And so you really need leaders that do that. And I've been fortunate that I've had those folks.
So did you find most of those mentors and those people who were willing to give you opportunities within the hospital, or were they mainly from the startup world and the industry?
I've had people from all walks of life. Like I said, some of the people on that panel were my mentors and friends. And so the idea that you could do stuff outside of clinical practice was interesting to me. I had a mentor who works to do quality and safety for the FDA on devices within the otolaryngology space. My dean in medical school was a pediatric ENT. It was the first time that I ever realized this small specialty that is ENT can spread its wings and have impact outside of our own specialty. Our specialty is really small, and when you look at deans of medical schools, you're looking at people who are internal medicine doctors or general surgeons. These really big specialties, and the idea that a pediatric otolaryngologist could be a dean was an eye-opening experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've had friends in the industry that have informed me, friends in finance. One of the things that I think has been eye-opening is the amount of things you can learn from disciplines outside your own. When I went to my master's program after I finished clinical practice, my master's in medical education, I went to the education school. I was learning about cognitive science of learning for K-12 education, for secondary education. It opened my eyes into all these possibilities. And one of the problems with medicine is we're so insulated. We're so insular. We don't look at other disciplines and other professions the same. We don't say, hey, what can we learn from them? And what can we learn from the law school? What can we learn from the business school? And that was the most amazing experience for me. And I actually took a class at MIT on games and learning, and that was really eye-opening. Like, what could we learn from video games? I can tell you learn a ton from playing video games and understanding, the process of the sociology, the psychology, the neuroscience, the motivational theory. There's an unbelievable depth of information that I've opened my eyes to in games. And working at the company, everybody from the games and technology space have, leaps and bounds forward in my thinking about how education is done and how it could be done.
Right. And at Level X, obviously the decision was made to make video games for doctors. But the decision also could have gone another way. You could have decided to make video games for K through 12 students or law students, or any area where video games could be helpful, which I would argue is maybe all of
everywhere.
Yeah. So, how was that decision made? And I know maybe you weren't there at the founding of the company, but to go into medicine that has some of these drawbacks, that has some of these, delays in how efficiently and how quickly they're willing to innovate. How does that play a role at Level X?
That's a great question. Medicine, as we talked about, they're relatively traditionalist, and so using technology and innovative approaches for education is not always the easiest route, I'll say. I think the origin of the company, I know, I was involved at the beginning as an advisor, and my friend Sam is the one that started the company. And really what he did was he was in the video games industry, but he had lots of physicians in his family. And so one of the things that, as somebody who came up knowing games and worked for LucasArts and worked for, Microsoft and developed the DirectX platform, which is what runs all the game consoles, and then eventually went into mobile gaming. He realized himself that there were opportunities when his dad came to him and said, I need to train my residents on this, really rare procedure that's really difficult to represent. Can you help me build something for them to train them? And so, Sam whipped something together in a few weekends and put it in the App Store. And all of a sudden, he saw this tremendous interest from the healthcare community. They were doing studies on him. They were implementing this game that he literally put together in 3 weekends for training for anesthesiologists across the country and across the world. And he said, what, the power of games can go beyond just gaming and entertainment. There's really a need here. And so it was sort of born out of the opportunity and the needs, but as well as, he had a connection to the field of healthcare. How we sort of settled on doctors as opposed to students or trainees was more one of the things that Level X prides itself on is that we try to democratize education. We try to democratize the experience. So our games are completely free to healthcare providers, really to anybody, but healthcare providers is our target audience. As well, it's accessible. It's on your phone. Mm-hmm. So in order to do that, he realized that, we have to have a business model that is supportive of this endeavor. And in order to be supportive, education and training is great, but it's not a sustainable model to rely on medical school dollars. It's not a sustainable model to rely on hospital dollars. What's more of a sustainable model is sort of the games industry. And the way that the games industry does is they gather an audience into a game, and then they put content in front of them that's paid for by advertisers, essentially. And so that was the model that he came to be. And we didn't want to be a subscription model. We didn't want to be this. We didn't want to be that. What we wanted to be was we wanted to be a service, a platform for practicing clinicians to come, practice their craft, compete against their friends, learn something while they're doing it, as well as create a sustainable model. And that's sort of how Level X was built and how we sustain ourselves now. We were venture-backed initially, and we just got acquired by a large medical technology company about a month and a half ago. So thank you. But again, that enables us to do more, right? We don't have to worry about our finances. We don't have to worry about our financial stability, and we can move forward on our mission for advancing the practice of medicine through play.
So what does more look like? I'm sure there are some confidential conversations. Sure. I know Level X is working with NASA and, making some video games to simulate certain medical situations that may happen in space even. Right. What do you see next for Level X?
I talk a lot about the double-edged sword. The double-edged sword of being able to do anything is we can do anything. And so, focus is always of the essence. I think that for us, one of the things we do is we sort of focus on individual specialties. So I think, the idea that we could be in every specialty is very attractive to me. The fact that we can use game psychology and game technology to advance the practice in all specialties. And no matter what the skills are, whether it be a cognitive skill, a medical decision making, an analytical skill, a procedural skill, we can do it all. And so we're just building up our tool chest right now into all those different areas and into all those different specialties. One thing that I personally like as a medical educator at heart is that at some point we do sort of cater to the more junior folks, medical students, nursing students, some of the more junior folks to use this technology, to use this powerful platform to advance learning and education to those particular audiences. That's my long-term hope. Right. But we have to build our business, and we have to build our platform to be able to support all those things.
So where do you think with that long-term goal of going into medical schools or nursing schools, certainly I have some ideas just coming out of medical school, but do you have an idea of, to say it nicely, do you have an idea of areas that could use some innovation?
Everyone. Uh-huh. Yeah. So, the company itself doesn't endeavor to go into education. That's not part of our long-term plan, but, it's something that I think in my mind, I'd like to see one day. And really, there's no limit to skills that you can build out in the games. One of the things that, as I know you were just playing, what's the really visually appealing one with the story behind it?
Ghost of Tsushima, right?
Ghost of Tsushima, yeah. And there's another one that just came out as well, Last of Us.
Oh my gosh.
Last of Us, yeah. So everybody's blowing up on social media about these two games, about how beautiful they are, about the narrative, about the empathy, about all the emotions get evoked by playing these games. Why can we not do that for patients? Why can we not do that for patient-provider interactions? These games platforms are built to evoke emotion, to motivate people to play. Games are an opt-in experience. Education is not. Education should be an opt-in experience. You should be so motivated to participate or experience it that you want to come to it. You want to do it instead of it being like homework or something like that. So I don't think there's anything in medicine that cannot be affected by games, by the technologies that we're talking about, and the platforms that we're going to see. We may or may not get to it, but obviously I separate the software and the hardware. But there's a big discussion about what virtual reality, what the role it's going to play in the future of medical education. education. And in my mind, virtual reality is just the hardware platform that you're delivering it. The software is what matters. And the software is the games, it's the content, it's the educational objectives that are built in. Doesn't matter whether it's on AR, VR, PC, in person, whatever it is. But there's just tremendous potential for everything that we do and the way we teach. And, you can read a book which is out of date by the second it's printed, or you can try to use software-based solutions that are kept up to date constantly.
Right, right. Eric, I'm very upset with you because I'm going to have to edit out a huge part of what you just said, and it's going to be a big awkward blink in the middle of this video because right now I'm in the middle of writing one of my next blog posts, which is about how The Last of Us 2 is a fantastic example of how video games can teach empathy and how that would be useful in medical school.
There you go.
If I publish this whole video, no one's going to read my blog post, so I'm going to have to edit it all out.
What you can do though is you can split this into two.
There we go.
You can have a whole conversation about the hidden curriculum, about the quote unquote soft skills of medicine and how games can make a difference. And you can put it out after your blog post and direct people back to your blog post.
Fantastic. We should have a couple wardrobe changes so that it looks like it's different conversations. Okay.
Absolutely, for sure. I'll just green screen me. You could just change the color.
That's right. Now you're at a beach.
Exactly.
I like it. So, yeah, that's something that is very much in my mind. Like I said, I just graduated from med school. Right now, that is certainly one of my.
You did your virtual one.
That's right. I have my cap and gown right next to me.
Oh my God!
And I was supposed to return it like a month ago.
They're not coming to get you, I promise.
I know. I need to return it. They were late on sending the label, so that's my excuse.
There you go.
So one of my questions for you was going to be, that Level X, one of the reasons I love Level X as a company is because how seriously they take themselves as a video game developer and a video game company. And you say it in the tagline for Level X, right? What is Level X? Level X makes video games for doctors. But I would imagine one of the drawbacks with being so honest about that is when you go to some of these medical educators or medical professionals who are maybe more traditional and they hear the word video games and their brain shuts off. You're nodding, so I imagine it happens.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. So how do you walk that line of, do you ever need to say simulations or do you always say video games?
So, one of the things about how doctors think, and I think a lot of people think this way, is they create buckets in their brain. And when new information comes in, you decide which bucket you're going to put it in. And you create a mental model of what that bucket is based on previous experience. And so the word simulation in many people's minds evokes an image of a mannequin, evokes the image of trainees, evokes the image of crisis resource management and team training, communication training, things like that. And we although by the true nature we are simulation, we distance ourselves from that terminology. We also distance ourselves from the terminology of gamification in serious games. The reason being is that, again, we feel that gamification in serious games, for the most part, is taking the superficial aspects of games, make it a leaderboard or a scoring system or competition, and they try to attach that onto an educational curriculum and expect it to change the motivational patterns and engagement of the people who use it. And the truth of it is it isn't. Games is a $90 billion business. We're talking 200,000 people in the United States work in the games industry. And that's from art to engineering to design to everything that you can think of. And really, it's a deep, deep discipline that understands psychology and sociology and motivation and all these different aspects that taking a scoreboard and putting it on an educational curriculum just doesn't do it justice. Mm-hmm. And so, but the problem is that when we have people who are existing med ed educators, they don't know what we are. And when they see game, they have like Pac-Man jumps in their brain, like what can we learn from Pac-Man? And the examples I give is I start to give them concrete examples of ways some games have created or recreated reality so that you learn by playing the game, which is what the greatest part of games is. What games allow you to do is they allow you to have a decision point at which the entire outcome informs your decision the second time around. Right? So you make interesting decisions, you see the outcome of that decision, and you're given the opportunity to make a different decision. Think about Angry Birds, right? So Angry Birds, you pull it back, and Sam, our CEO, loves to use this example, and you fall short. So you know, okay, well, I need to pull back a little bit harder. Okay, we could tell you like, hey, you need to pull back, 4 centimeters. That's not going to be an engaging experience. So that balance of reward and frustration, all the psychology that goes into it, all the dopamine releases, we could talk about neuroscience at end. But one of the things I give them practical examples. I said, there's a game called Kerbal Space Program. Have you ever heard of Kerbal Space Program?
I haven't.
I strongly recommend you look it up. So Kerbal Space Program was made as it was a game. It wasn't intended to educate, but it has real physics built into the game. So, and the whole goal of it is you're given these Kerbals, which are basically like lemmings, they're little aliens, and your goal is to build a spaceship for them to get them into orbit and, explore distant planets. All of the physics, like the thrust and the force and the rotation, everything is built to scale. It is actually true to form. And so you can actually learn physics and astrophysics by playing this game. And aeronautical engineering, you can understand drag and thrust and all these different concepts by playing this game, and without realizing that you're learning it. The other example I give is, at my master's program, they had a program called EcoMove, which was Move is a multi-user virtual environment. They were trying to teach ecology. And what it was everybody was, a character within this grand scheme using a user virtual environment similar to World of Warcraft or something like that, right? A multiple member MMOG. That's what it is, right? So you're all in the same space and interacting with each other, and they're trying to figure out why the fish died in the river. And you've come to find out that, by talking to park rangers and sampling the water, you find out that there was a plant that was dumping toxic waste into the river. So you understand how ecosystems work. My friend at UT Dallas built a mod for Minecraft to understand petrochemical processing. And again, you're playing a game, but you're using the constructivism of Minecraft to learn how petrochemical processing is. And all the downstream things. So I try to explain to people that the games have tremendous power, and that if we can harness that power for education, we can go a long way toward changing the motivational pattern, changing the way that people learn, and making it interesting and fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so another thing Level X does that makes me love them as a game company so much is they attract talent from the game industry. So in that way, not only are you bridging into the medical world, but you're really going both ways and extending into the video game world as well. Do you think that could go as far as accessing gamers who, maybe aren't turning on their consoles or phones or computers to learn, but that could play one of these games, whether it be the Minecraft mod or a Level X game one day or some other game, and have an experience where they're learning?
Absolutely. I think that actually one of the things we're doing a skunkworks for a new project, and I can't really speak to it specifically, but we just brought in somebody who's been in the games industry for 25 years and, very, very, very talented, well-accomplished designer. And he looked at the prototype that we built and said, this is like a consumer level game. Like this would actually get people interested in this. And it was built on the principles of there was a need. And myself and some of the engineers worked on developing a model and, refining the model. And, the idea that you can give conceptual understanding of a very complex process through a game that has consumer level appeal is the power of working with game designers, right? I mean, I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. The designers wouldn't have come up on that own without the healthcare influence, right? So it's this idea of how we work together between the medical and the artists and the engineering that fosters this creative process. And I'll tell you, my engineer now could tell you all of the basics of, not even the basics, like all the advanced concepts that it takes medical residents and medical students years to understand. And he understood it in like a couple weeks of me explaining it to him, right? And so, I trust some of our engineers to intubate me more than I trust some of my some residents. That's neither here nor there, but so yes, I think that there's opportunities if you harness the technology correctly and you marry it appropriately to whatever the experience is going to be. Absolutely, people are going to learn, and we have plenty of people that are non-medical that play our games, and it's because there's an appeal to it. There's an interest in there. There's curiosity about how this can be represented, and really the possibilities are really, really endless.
Wow. Yeah. And I want to go back to talking about your specific role at Level X. So what is your title at Level X?
I'm the Vice President Medical Director.
And what does that mean?
A whole lot of nothing. So when I first started with Level X, I started as an advisor, and then I became the lead advisor. Sort of at the origin of the company was back about 4.5 years ago, and essentially what that evolved into being a lead advisor was basically trying to give content overview. So we were building an Airway X game at that point, which was doing fiber optic intubation, which as a pediatric otolaryngologist, I do a lot. And as an airway specialist, I do a lot. So I was providing, does this look real? Does this capture what you're doing in real life? Those types of things, and more product and development type role. As I became the vice president medical director, I became in more of an oversight strategy role. And I've evolved over time to be that, because once I sort of got a better understanding of the games we're building, what we're doing, how we're doing it, what are the choices we make, and we also went into specialties that I wasn't an expert in, I sort of took that higher level sort of leadership strategic role. Right now, I oversee a lot of different things. So I'm the medical representation of strategy. So when we're looking at new specialties, when we're thinking about what we're trying to build, what we're thinking about the business model, when we're thinking about expanding into new areas, I come at it from, this is the healthcare perspective. I'm the only physician that is only practicing physician that is a employee of the company. Everybody else is advisors, consultants. So, I try to provide that. The other is wearing my educational research hat. We do outcomes research, so I do oversee those projects as well, looking at our data, running studies, efficacy studies, things like that, outcomes measurement. So I oversee that. I have a whole medical team that actually reports through production, but they help write all of the cases. So we have 7 or 8, mostly biomedical engineers and MDs that actually didn't do residency, so very similar to yourself, that help work with our subject matter experts to create the content. And I provide oversight for that. If there's things that need to be reviewed, or we had a play test that didn't go so well, and they sort of want my input. So I provide some advisory to our medical team and help with some of the process in that writing of the cases, play testing, things like that. Also I help with onboarding new physicians, new subject matter experts. So if we're looking for, let's say we're going to OB-GYN, so then I onboard our OB-GYN advisors. This is what we're doing, this is what we're about. And then I also represent the company from a medical standpoint in the press. So I do a lot of press, I do a lot of presentations, a lot of marketing type functions. And so, I sort of in the medical voice of the company, while Sam is sort of the technical voice of the company.
Right. So when you said a whole lot of nothing, you meant a whole lot of something.
But it's really, as a startup, when I started as an advisor, there were 3 employees. Yeah. We're almost at 100 employees now. So we're a very different company from when I started just 4.5 years ago. So, it's ever evolving, and we're hiring new people. We've hired, I can't even tell you how many people we've hired in the last couple of weeks, even. So it's expanding so rapidly that the role constantly evolves. And so, there's some legacy stuff that I did and some, newer stuff that I do. So yeah, just about everything.
Wow. That's incredible. So you mentioned you're hiring now. I did take a peek before this at the Level X job board, as I often do, just to see what's going on over there. Sure. And I saw there was another medical a biomedical solutions specialist position that's up.
Yes.
So I wanted to shout that out in case there's anyone watching
Yes.
that is.
Everybody go to our careers page. We're hiring lots of different roles. So
there we go. And another thing that I see you guys, on social media, often if there's a developer that closes its doors, I see you guys post a lot, saying, come over here. And one interesting thing I think is the connection between the video game industry and the medical industry that people might not know about, but they're hot topics on both ends. And that's in the video game industry, crunch, and in the medical industry, burnout. And you guys, I think rightfully so, advertise yourself as a video game company that does not crunch.
We do not. I think our QA people sometimes right before a big launch crunch just a little bit, but nothing like, week-long crunches like a lot of other studios do. And we pride ourselves on that. We pride ourselves. In fact, right now I'm on a task force specifically looking at workplace in-home measures that we can take to decrease anxiety during COVID-19. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we make our life more comfortable for our employees who are working from home? Do we need to buy them chairs? Do we need to give them webcams? Monitors? What can we do? We send them snacks. So, we used to get snacks. One of the big things, benefits about video game companies is they have tons of snacks. We had a coffee machine. We had a bevy machine. We had, beer on tap. We had everything, right? We had all these snacks and everything. And so that's part of the work-life balance that really gets played out in, pardon the pun, played out in video game studios. And so what the head of our team basically started sending those home to people in their homes. So they actually fill out every month, they fill out a snack list. Hey, what kind of snacks do you want sent to your house? And they send it to your house. You get this care package from Level X with like, Cheetos and anything else you want to eat. So it's all about trying to create that work-life balance, and people are encouraged to take PTO. We actually had a game day where after a big launch of a product, we closed the studio essentially, closed it. It was during COVID. And we had a game day where everybody, went online and played tabletop sim of a bunch of different board games, or they did, MMOs, MMOGs, all these different games. And nobody had to work on that Friday as a celebration for all the hard work that we've done.
Wow.
And I think that is something that healthcare would never, ever do.
Yeah.
And so I think that I myself, actually funny enough you say that, when everybody asked me what it's like being in both worlds, I said I prevent burnout on a daily basis. Because if I get a big day in the OR or I'm stressed, tomorrow I get to go make video games or help make video games that have a reason and a purpose and a greater good. That is my prevention of burnout. And we take it very seriously as a company. We are very about diversity and inclusion. We're all about wellness and life balance. I think that our company is better than almost anybody I've ever worked for, and especially in the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry just doesn't have that caring feeling, funny enough, that video game studios have.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you're saying is ringing true, and it's so interesting as someone who is passionate about medicine and is passionate about video games to hear you compare the industries in that way and how medicine could learn from the video game industry is so interesting.
Yes.
In many ways, right? We're talking about educational games, but even as in the industry itself.
But employee wellness, I mean, it's everything.
Right.
It's everything that matters.
And I mean, it's one of the hard things that we'll just talk about it briefly. But in healthcare, obviously, you're saving people's lives. You're caring for real people, and I think from that stems some of this tradition and some of this rigidity and some of this, maybe the issues that we have with wellness. But certainly, I think we touched upon it earlier in the talk. There are things that the medical world can learn from not just the video game industry, but the startup world and many other industries. I mean, I remember when I was working as a product manager for a startup in medical school, we used agile planning, right? And basically what that is just a framework for how to approach problems and how to do teamwork. And medical, in the hospital, medicine is everything teamwork. I mean, that's the name of the game. And when you're rounding on patients and when you're back in the team room coming up with the plan and working in interdisciplinary teams. And I thought, wow, what if we could take this agile method and these methods of sprints and where we're dividing tasks and we're thinking, how long will all these things work? And actually, what is the best way that we can, make an efficient plan, something that is so often lacking in medicine. And hopefully that can happen when more people start thinking like this, having conversations like this, because there's no reason that type of teamwork planning has to be stuck in startups.
It's funny because I start using the term sprints and deliverables with my residents. So like
that wasn't covered.
It definitely bleeds. It definitely bleeds over. But your point is well taken, right? Think of Six Sigma. Think of Lean. Think of the case method. All of these things were not originated in medicine. They originated from other industries that we adopted into our industry. And think about, I think now that a lot of sim centers are starting to use Unity, right? So Unity was the engine that, independent game designers were using in their basements to create games. And now you're starting to see it coming into simulation. You're going to see it more and more, these visual authoring tools that make it accessible for people who normally didn't have access to it. I started using, what is that? Not Scratch. God, there's another platform that we use that I brought in to try to starts with a T.
You know so much more about this than I do.
Oh man, I can't remember. But there's like, different software. You told me about Kahoot, right? So, think about all these games, all these software that were developed, and all these methods that were developed in other industries that we can bring into medicine.
Right.
I think that we need to open our eyes and not be, holier than thou in our thinking.
I think it's a great point. So I want to pivot because I want to respect your time.
Oh, you're fine. I'm the rest of my day's open, so I'm all yours.
Okay. All right. Good. But also, I feel like I could talk to you for the rest of the evening, and I'm sure you want to eat dinner at some point. So
the salmon and broccoli can wait.
There you go. So let's talk about games for a little bit.
Yeah.
So obviously, you work for a game company. Would you call yourself a gamer?
That's a loaded question. Gamer is such an interesting terminology. Gamers will say they're gamers to other gamers, but if a non-gamer calls somebody a gamer, it's almost derogatory. It's a super weird thing, right? Because you're like, oh, do you play games? Oh yeah, I'm a gamer, right? Like if the other person's a gamer. But if somebody like myself who like would say I'm not necessarily a gamer says, oh, you're a gamer, they're like, what are you talking about? That's such an old, like it's like, come on, guys. I think, growing up, I played a lot of games. My brother and I played a lot of games. My brother's also a surgeon, so he's a neurosurgeon. And actually, it's really funny when I was doing his best man speech, I actually got an opportunity to rotate with him. And I was a medical student. He was a chief resident in neurosurgery in Cleveland. And so I actually came out and did a month rotation as a medical student or fourth year to actually operate with my brother, which was an unbelievable opportunity, unbelievable experience. And I cherish it to this day. But when we were kids and, you messed up on Nintendo, he'd smack my hands and say, why'd you do that? If you like missed, the pole in Super Mario Brothers, you're like, God, why'd you do that? And then I found out when we started operating with each other that he would hit my hand and say, why'd you do that? It's like Nintendo all over again. Right. So, and now I live that life where, the games and the hand-eye coordination, everything comes from, understanding games and playing games. And I've always been interested in games, whether it be board games or video games. So, I had an Xbox and I was playing a bunch of games from that. I've gotten really into a lot of board games as well. And so one of the things that's really cool is we have a game night every Thursday night. And actually, no, it's one Thursday a month that everybody in the company has a game night. And so we used to do it in person with board games, but now we've used all the different platforms like Tabletop Sim and all the different games that actually can run board games online. And so I stay involved with those. I try to play those games. I'm learning a ton about board games, which have their own intricacies, right? Their own, you're really beholden to a lot of mechanics that are built into those games because you're not on visual fidelity. right? You can't fall back on, oh my God, this is a beautiful scene. This is just another role-playing game where you're shooting people, right?
Right,
But
right.
what engages you is the story and the theme and all that stuff. Whereas board games don't have that advantage. They have to rely on the actual gameplay to keep you engaged.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we've done that in medicine. There's a game called Friday Night in the ER that is actually a board game that's about resource management within the ER. So don't always forget about board games have tremendous power as well, and probably way underutilized in healthcare as well. To do that. So I would say I'm a pseudo gamer.
I like it.
I don't play games every night, and my fiance appreciates that. But
Oh man.
I will play games when the opportunities present themselves.
Right, right. No, that's very interesting. I like that thought of, board games and how they fall into that larger umbrella of games. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't play many board games, but maybe I should start.
You should, because there's really cool mechanics that are built into board games. And actually, during my master's program, had a class, the class I took at MIT on games and learning. We actually built a game. And I actually still have the game. I have the board game saved on my computer. It's called Divide and Conquer. And it's about cell division and cell metabolism.
Hmm.
And the mechanics we built into this game were not earth shattering. They were the same mechanics that's in Monopoly, right? It's the same mechanics in a bunch of different games, resource management, production and things like that. And I want to turn into a digital game, and we'll see if I can turn it into a
Wow.
digital board game. So that's my hope with my training in Unity to build a digital board game
There
and
you go.
give homage to all the people that helped with the game back in my master's program.
I love it. Yeah, when I was younger, I used to play, I think it was the Game of Life. I think there was a
Oh,
digital version as well
yeah,
as Risk. And it was just fun because it had all these extra animations and stuff. It was nothing,
right.
much more complicated than the actual board games itself. But those were always fun.
Yeah, but Monopoly, right? I mean, think about Monopoly. Like that game was pretty. I mean, you sit there and play for hours,
Oh, absolutely. And you'd
and
cheat, you'd
you
steal
cheat all the
money.
time, right? You're the banker, which basically means you're able
That's
to
right. That's right. It means you
loans
win.
without telling anybody. Yeah, exactly. But there's games called Hotels that I played as a kid that I loved. I loved Hotels, but it was essentially the same mechanic as Monopoly. It was the exact same mechanic, but
Right.
it was still fun and engaging and interesting. And so don't overlook board games.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a great point. I mean, games are something that are inherent to humans and
Yeah.
to, what we have done for entertainment to pass the time. And specifically, the area that I'm most interested in is how they help us connect.
Yeah.
And I think everyone has the memories of sitting around the table with your family or friends with a board game, and just think about how that made connections around the table.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
family time.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And for me, it's the same with video games. I mean, I try and connect with my friend. I just moved out of Washington, D.C. I still play games with my friends there, and we get a chat, as we're running around in Apex Legends. We're just talking about
Yeah.
how's COVID over in D.C., how's it over in
Yeah.
Missouri,
Right. Right.
And it's a digital hangout space.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, like, teaching empathy and talking about emotions. I'm actually reading a book right now about emotions in games, like how they build emotions into games, how they engage you, how they pull you in and give you that emotional investment. It's a really good book. I'll share it with you
Please do.
offline. Where is it? It's on my bookshelf, but it's unbelievably good. Probably James Paul G's book is probably my favorite book of all time of how games and learning cross over. It changed the way that I think about life, but this book is excellent. But have you played the game Papers, Please?
No.
So look it up. So one of our
Okay.
old game
Papers, please.
designers, Nick Fortuna, showed me Papers, Please. And what Papers, Please is you're a border agent and you're reviewing passports to decide whether or not somebody should get into the country or you're going to kick them out. And you're basically doing very quick pattern recognition to figure out whether the person you let in is going to do harm or do good. And you basically have to make these split-second decisions, and they all come with these stories. And they come with these stories of, oh, my husband and this, and I have a job and I'm trying to feed 2 kids. And, it's playing on this empathy to try and figure out how does it change your decision making. They actually recently made a YouTube reenactment, I guess is the best way to put it, of a real actors reenacting Papers, Please. So YouTube Papers, Please, and look up the reenactment, and I'll give you the essence of what the game is and how emotions play into the game.
Wow.
It's tremendously powerful. And there's another, there's Poverty Sim. There's a bunch of games that sort of play on the mindset of, empathy and, connection. It's games are tremendously powerful. Even look how games are being used. And one thing we didn't get to touch on is how games are being used in practice. Pain distraction is a huge thing for VR and gaming, right? So rehabilitation, so knee rehabilitation from injury. They're using VR and games to do that. Exercise, they're doing games for that. ADHD, the big groundbreaking thing. FDA just approved a game to treat ADHD.
Right.
I mean, these are like, seeing the use cases for games, and they're rapidly expanding because people realize, oh my God, this is a tremendous platform.
Right. It's really exciting. And just like when I was fourth year or third year in med school, and I felt like I was alone in the sense that, there weren't people out there who were doing non-clinical things with their MD. And then I found that to not be true. Now, I've felt alone that, I'm this MD gamer. That's my tagline on Twitter. And I'm passionate about games and I'm passionate about medicine. And come on, let's just get them together.
I know.
Right? And I thought I was alone, and I started posting about it, and I started putting out these blog posts about it. And that's the idea of this video as well. All of a sudden, I see there's this huge community out there of MD gamers, and they're talking about what games are their favorite games, and they're taking advice of which ones they should play. And there are people with interests all over the place.
Absolutely. We actually toyed with the hashtag MDGamer for our social media platforms, and I was like, you know what? Or Med, what was it, MedGamer or Gamer Med? I can't remember what the hashtag was.
I'm Digital Doc Gamer, so don't take that.
No, we won't. But it was a hashtag to try, because there's Med Twitter. There's hashtag MedEd, hashtag, there's all these hashtags, and we thought about how can we like harness MD in gaming. So we're still the jury's still out on that one, but yeah, there's definitely a community. There's definitely interest. I think there's a ton of interest just in besides games, just in physicians wanting to do other cool, interesting stuff. The question is how many MD gamers want to use games to to teach something or to learn. Who wants to go beyond just playing as opposed to creating? And even if it's creating consumer level games, right? So I'd be interested to see what portion of the community is looking to do that, whether or not they want to do something more with the games, which would be interesting. But there's definitely interest abound.
Absolutely, yeah. Or for them to take their experiences and help put it in a game to share, life of a doctor and what that's like for more of the general public.
Well, that, and the one thing that I've realized working for Level X is people who play games have an understanding of what things work and what things don't. And that's a tremendous perspective when you have the healthcare perspective and the gaming perspective to understand where's the crossover, where are the opportunities, where's the white space, where is it where nobody is doing this. I think, the thing you talked about, empathy and the soft skills of medicine is something that really has not been tapped into. And we should, right? We should look to that because you can learn so much more by playing a game than by having, some paid actor coming in to do an H&P on. I think that's so overdone, and thank God COVID did away with that for right now.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, we mentioned the simulation mannequins. That's right now they have the big red target over them in my eyes, because coming out of the system, I don't want to offend anybody who may be passionate about these mannequins, but for me, they were $12,000 paperweights. And they really, kind of didn't do much. For anyone who doesn't know, there's these expensive mannequins that a lot of universities and medical centers have for running simulations. But basically, they're connected to a monitor with vitals and someone that can be in the control room and changing these vitals. But other than, looking at that vitals board, maybe that, I didn't use them right, but I never felt that they were doing really anything other than kind of breaking some immersion. So that's where I could see video games going into medical schools.
It's almost like you read my mind. So I'm actually giving a grand rounds on Wednesday specifically about simulation. And I similarly take a same perspective on it. I have lots of friends in simulation. I'm a fan of simulation in certain settings, but the idea that the evolution of simulation has been adding more functionality to a mannequin is like taking the iPhone example from Steve Jobs, who said if I'd asked people what they wanted, it would just been more buttons or something different. We evolved, and
Right.
I feel like simulation has not evolved. And I think that adding more bells and whistles to the same mannequins and having an order of magnitude more expensive, now they're 100,000 instead of 10,000, right? Is short-sighted, because one of the biggest problems with simulation, and the problem that will always belabor simulation, is access. You have to have access to the physical mannequin in order to participate. Once you move that to more software-based simulations, you remove that barrier, and you also lower cost because it's scalable. Because now you can build 100 modules instead of 5, right? And so the economics of cost go down dramatically when you go away from a physical device to do that. And nothing has proven that more than the COVID-19 pandemic, because every sim center has shuttered because you cannot have people in that location. But imagine if you had a software-based sim that people could play at home on their own time, doing their own thing. This never would be a problem. And just like telehealth has moved forward because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and all of these other technologies have moved forward that have long-standing been waiting in the wings for the right moment, I think same thing with games, same thing with software-based sim, is that we will realize that we will push forward and use technology as it's meant to be, to advance medical education, to advance simulation, to advance all these other fields that were always there. It was just COVID-19 made it obvious about the limitations of the existing system.
Right. Wow. It's super exciting. I feel like, yeah, I'm right there with you. I can't wait if there's a way for me to hear that talk, that would be awesome.
Yeah. I think we'll try to record it and I'll send it to you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love your feedback. So
definitely, always. So Eric, if people want to follow you on social media or follow Level X, you've done a lot of talks at different conferences in the med ed space and the gaming space. What's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, so Twitter is probably my easiest. It's at Dr. Eric Gant, Gant. Not at Dr. Gamer. What's your tweet?
Right now I'm Digital Doc MD.
Digital Doc MD. So I'm MD Digital Doc. No, just kidding. I'm at Dr. Eric Gant, GNT. I apologize. It's a really old Twitter handle. Also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have a lot of people actually that see our stuff and reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've given talks at different organizations that are online. Actually, I've done some podcasts, some interviews, and some blog posts on the Harvard Macy website. I'm very involved with them, and they have great content for people who are interested in med ed. And hopefully, we'll bring some more gaming content to them. Hopefully, I can get you plugged in too, Ahmed. Just reach out to me. I'm very good about responding. And you can also email me if you direct message me on any of the platforms. I'll give you my email. So
awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much. It's been so nice for me to talk and nerd out with you for the past hour or so. You've been hugely important in my career and my life in the past couple years. So personally, thank you so much. And I have a feeling we'll end up doing this again sometime soon.
I would love to. And I definitely see our paths crossing many, many times over the years. So.
Oh yeah. All right. I'll stop the
Awesome.
recording here, and we'll
Sounds
talk
good.
soon.